The climate is changing. Oceans are warming. Extreme weather is more common. Threatened species are under strain. Whether we accept it or not, it's happening. What we might do about it is up to us. We're on borrowed time.
I'm Andrew Murphy of the Mill Valley Public Library, recording on behalf of the Borrowed Time series. Joining me by phone is environmental activist and musician Daryl Cherney. Along with Greg King, Cherney co-founded the effort to save the Headwaters Forest in the mid-'80s, in addition to other areas of old-growth redwood forests. Cherney has been an Earth First organizer, a tree sitter, a presidential candidate, and he also won a federal lawsuit against the FBI for violating his civil rights. Daryl, thanks for joining.
Great to be here, Andrew.
I hope to spend some time talking about your efforts to protect redwoods, but I first want to pay tribute to Judi Bari and acknowledge that we're approaching the 30-year anniversary of the day that you and she were victims of an assassination attempt by car bombing in Oakland. Do you mind sharing your memories of that day?
Certainly. In 1990, which is exactly 30 years ago, Judi and I had ramped up our efforts to save the redwoods, specifically the ancient redwoods of Humboldt County, California, about 200 miles north of Marin County, by holding something called Redwood Summer, which was based on Freedom Summer in Mississippi. And the concept was that as long as things happened in Mississippi back in the 1960s where nobody else could see them, that bigotry and Jim Crow laws and discrimination against people of color could continue without anybody noticing. We took that lesson and applied it to the redwoods, that as long as ancient redwoods are being cut down, but only the people in Humboldt County or Mendocino County knew about it, the rest of the country would be unaware. So we called for Redwood Summer, which, just like Freedom Summer in the early 60s, called for college students and anybody else, old and young, to come to the redwoods and become freedom riders for the forest. This concept scared the bejesus out of the timber industry, and we were also organizing timber fallers and mill workers and truck drivers to become part of our alliance, because Judi, in addition to being a Earth First organizer, was also a union organizer, an interesting combination, and she was very good at both. Anyway, this really scared the industry to the point where we started to get a lot of death threats, about 36 in all, in a very short period of time. And then we started around April. And then on May 24th of 1990, somebody put a bomb in Judi Bari's car, which went off on Park and MacArthur in Oakland, Park Boulevard and MacArthur in Oakland, right in front of Oakland High School. That car bomb almost killed Judi Bari. It slightly injured myself by some miracle, really. And at that point, we were immediately arrested by the FBI and Oakland police together, saying that we were actually terrorists whose bomb had gone off accidentally rather than the victims of an assassination attempt, which was pretty darn obvious given the tensions up here in Humboldt and Mendocino counties back in 1990. One reason that this was a ridiculous notion that we were guilty of bombing ourselves was that the bomb itself, and the FBI knew this immediately because they found the components of the bomb that were remaining components. The bomb had a motion trigger, meaning it would only go off if the car was moving. That motion was a little ball bearing that could connect two wires. And so who would drive around in a car with a motion device that was activated that would only go off if the car was moving? That's ridiculous. Also, the FBI and Oakland police, especially the FBI, lied about the evidence immediately, right on the scene. They said that there was that there were nails strapped to the bomb. And those nails were identical to nails in a bag in the back of Judi Bari's car. Now, Judi was a professional carpenter. She was actually a foreman, and she called herself a foreman, even though she was a feminist. She liked the word foreman at California Yurts. She supervised a 6-man construction crew, and she had tools in the back of her station wagon, which was normal. But the nails in the back of Judi Bari's car were roofing nails, which are short and fat and had a big head. And the nails strapped to the bomb were finishing nails, which were long and skinny with no head. It's like saying a Volkswagen and a Rolls Royce are identical just because they're cars. These nails did not match. So they lied about the evidence. They lied about the location of the hole in the seat, and they found evidence that said that we were not guilty. Nevertheless, we were arrested. Judi was handcuffed in her bed at the ICU in Highland Hospital. Anyway, we were never charged, even though we were arrested, but our names were dragged through the mud. The whole concept of Redwood Summer had its reputation dragged through the mud. It became not just, were we trying to save the Redwoods, but are these people terrorists? And then at the end of the day, we sued them for a violation of our civil rights. We didn't sue them for bombing us, which is a commonly made mistake. We sued them for saying for violating our civil rights, meaning that the federal government is not allowed to lie about you, to violate your constitutional guarantee of freedom of speech. So that they lied about us because of our political position in wanting to save the Redwoods, not because we were guilty. That's a violation of the First Amendment. We also sued them for illegal arrest and false arrest and illegal search and seizure, because they searched our homes, in Judi's case, twice. So, and then 12 years later, we won that lawsuit. We were awarded $4.4 million by a jury of our peers. However, Judi didn't live to see the victory. She lived through the bombing. She was crippled for life. She had a fractured pelvis, a partially paralyzed right leg, internal damage. She could never sit down really much for the rest of her life without the aid of a special pillow. And she walked with a cane for a good portion of her life at the end. But she died of cancer in 1997. So our legal team and myself took that lawsuit to a victory. And, I think at the end, this showed how that there's really billions of dollars wrapped up in the timber industry, and that we don't know who did it. I produced a movie that people could watch on YouTube for free called Who Bombed Judi Bari. It won 7 awards. We took it on film festivals and did a commercial run with it in 2012. But I have some pretty good ideas who was involved with the bombing. Certainly the FBI was covering up the tracks of who bombed us. But it just shows that even if you try to save the Redwoods, even want to save a few remaining 2,000-year-old trees, the industry can be brutal. The status quo can be brutal when it comes to defending their desire to make as much money as possible.
Right. Thank you. Out of curiosity, what was your first thought when the actual bomb detonated? Well,
about 8 months earlier, which would have been August of 1989, Judi and I were riding in her previous station wagon, along with another friend, Pam Davis, and 4 children. Judi had 2 children, 2 girls, and Pam Davis, our other organizing partner, had 2 boys. So we had 4 young children in the back of the station wagon and 3 grown-ups, and we were rear-ended by a logging truck on our way to a protest on Highway 128 heading toward the coast, from Boonville heading to the coast of California. I think we were going to Fort Bragg. And so when we got, and we were just driving like 5 miles an hour. We were about to pull over to the side of the road to pick up a hitchhiker that we knew, when all of a sudden, boom, the car went flying up in the air and came down crashing into a parked pickup in front of a cafe in Philo, the town of Philo, California. So when were bombed, my very first thought was, oh God, we got rear-ended again. But then I said to myself, I don't have whiplash. If it had been rear-ended, my head would have gone back and forth. And so I thought, well, maybe we were run over by a train, because it wasn't that long before that Brian Wilson, a peace activist, had his legs cut off, was trying to blockade a train in Concord, California, at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. He was blockading a weapons train. And no, we weren't rear-ended by a train. And then two teenage boys came running out of Oakland High School, waving their arms, going, "It's a bomb! It's a bomb!" And that's when I realized that we'd been bombed, because who has the experience of being bombed? Not that many people, unless you're in the military in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere. So I had no idea what had happened until I was informed by two young men who were screaming that in some form of excitement.
Thanks.
And then my next thought was Judi, to check her out, because the first thing I did was check my arms and legs and make sure everything was functioning, which it was. Actually, I really didn't tell you my first thought. My very first thought was that I was dead, because we're just driving, Judi and I are yapping along, and all of a sudden, my ears are ringing, my eyes are closed. It's like, which is a sound of my eardrums flapping. And I had no previous experience to know what had happened, and I just thought we were dead. And then I realized I wasn't dead and tried to figure it out. So then after all that, I went and checked on Judi, started talking to her, keep her talking, keep her, not don't let her pass out. Believe it or not, I know medically, first aid wise, you're supposed to keep the person talking. Don't let them fall asleep. She kept, and I just told her, I love you, you're going to make it, you're going to make it, you're going to live, I love you. I just kept repeating that over and over again until the medics arrived.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just read about 20 questions, play 20 questions, except that it's not 20 questions, it's 20 statements that relate to the bombing. And I'd just like you, if you don't mind, just to say true or false. And some of these you've already mentioned, but it'll work fine. So you and Judi Bari survived a car bomb explosion on May 24th, 1990.
Mm-hmm.
9 months before the bombing, you, Judi, another friend, and 4 children were deliberately rear-ended by a logging truck that you just blocked on the road the day before.
Yes, that is correct.
And Judi called that incident attempted murder and gave a green light for others to attack you.
Yes, because the police tried to say that we were rear-ended because our brake lights weren't working, but the brake lights were working. We actually tested them on the scene. And so, in other words, they were blaming the victims back then. And the logging truck driver did see me personally come out of a market where I bought the kids some soft drinks, the children some soft drinks. So the log truck driver not only recognized the car, but he would have had the opportunity to see me get into the car because he was the truck behind us. So we got on the road and pulled out. So he knew who we were. And when we slowed down, he did not hit his brakes. There was no squealing of brakes. He just ran into us full speed.
And he even kind of gave you a apologetic confession in a way, didn't he? Didn't he say, I didn't see...
That's right. He came I'm the only one who heard it, but I heard it loud and clear. He came running out of his truck going, I didn't see the children. Meaning that, Mel, I wouldn't have run into you if I knew there were kids in the car.
And for several months leading up to the bombing, you mentioned that you received a lot of death threats. You did report them to the Humboldt County Sheriff, who took no action, correct?
I reported them to the Humboldt County Sheriff and the FBI locally in Humboldt County when a bomb threat came in to a logging company, actually. I called the FBI, not on my behalf, but on behalf of Van Meter Logging, who was concerned that we were sending bomb threats, so I called the FBI. And Judi Bari also talked to Mendocino County Sheriff as well. And the Mendocino County Sheriff said, if you turn up dead, then we'll investigate.
And a month before you were attacked, FBI agent Frank Doyle led a bomb instruction course in a clear-cut on Louisiana Pacific Lumber Company property, right?
It was actually Louisiana Pacific. 30 days before the bombing, and then 2 weeks before the bombing, so very related activities occurred in relation to the bombing. 30 days on April 24th of 1990, the FBI conducted a bomb school, which is a standard, believe it or not, FBI course. It's a police academy course, and there's a police academy in Humboldt County, California, at College of the Redwoods. And what Frank Doyle, who was the head of the terrorism division of the FBI, had done was he made arrangements with his bomb expert buddy, Frank Doyle, another Frank, Frank Wigginton. So it was Frank Doyle of the FBI, Frank Wigginton of Louisiana Pacific Lumber Company. And Louisiana Pacific had a clear cut that they were allowing the FBI to use their to blow up cars with. But what was interesting was that when you're teaching bomb school, the FBI chose to blow up cars with the bomb, a pipe bomb, on the inside of a car. Now, as far as I know, this is not actually a very common scenario that you see in bombings. You hear about people being bombed with C4 explosives or the bombs being on the outside of the car and fire bombs, but a pipe bomb under the driver's seat, that's unusual. And so for the FBI, what the FBI did was they were duplicating the exact same scenario that would happen 30 days later in Judi Bari's car on Louisiana Pacific property with the head of Louisiana Pacific Security present to secure the premises. And we were protesting against Louisiana Pacific as well as Pacific Lumber Company. Well, then 2 weeks after that, bomb school, a bomb went off in Louisiana Pacific sawmill in Cloverdale, about 100 miles north of the Bay Area, ballpark. And it was a firebomb with a pipe and a can of gasoline. It did not go off properly. And it was a Cloverdale mill bomb 2 weeks after bomb school and 2 weeks before Judi and I were bombed. So there was, and that bomber we have since learned was the same bomber who put the bomb in Judi Bari's car. And the reason we know that is 2 weeks after that, when Judi Bari's car was bombed, somebody wrote a letter and took credit for it, saying that the same person made both bombs, the bomb at Louisiana Pacific sawmill and the bomb in Judi Bari's car. Now, why would somebody bomb a sawmill who would also bomb Judi Bari's car? It seems like opposite targets, but not unless you're trying to frame us for being bombers. So they bombed Louisiana Pacific sawmill. That didn't wind up framing us. So then they went and targeted Judi Bari directly herself for assassination. And even though she was crippled for life, it didn't kill her. And I got into the car, honestly, by accident. I was actually riding in another car and switched cars to be with Judi because we were going to perform that night. And we wanted to discuss our performance and the set list and, the usual things you talk about before a performance. We were heading down to University of California at Santa Cruz. It was a big show. We had quite a few hundred people there. So I got into the car to talk that over with Judi. I was actually riding in a whole separate car. Judi and I were traveling in separate vehicles. But I got into her car to talk to her about it. And the bomb went off just within minutes of me getting to the car. So whoever bombed Judi's car was not anticipating that I got in the car. And as Judi and I talked about this, we'll never probably know, but it's possible that they were going to kill Judi and blame me for trying to kill her because we were breaking up as romantic lovers. But we'll never know if that was true because I got in the car, we both lived, and I took the lawsuit to the finish line even after Judi passed away.
Cool. And I will come back to some questions on that, but I kind of want to just complete my timeline here.
Sure.
On the day when you were bombed, 20 minutes after the bombing, Oakland police and FBI were both on the scene, and the Oakland police chief, within 20 minutes, had already labeled you terrorists after reviewing the damage with FBI agent Frank Doyle, who had previously led the instruction class, correct?
Yes.
And video evidence taken by the FBI captured them laughing at the damage of the car within the hour. Is that right?
In a very short period of time, yes.
And that same audio includes Frank Doyle saying, well, this is it. This is the final exam right here.
That's right, which was a reference, we believe, to bomb school, that Frank Doyle had just taught bomb school. He was present at the scene with one of his students at bomb school, which was an Oakland Police Department bomb technician, bomb expert. And so he turns to the bomb expert and says, this is it, don't you think? This is the final exam. Now, Frank Doyle denied that he was the one saying that. But that was a lie because we have since heard many samples of Frank Doyle's voice because he went on to become a guest star at Mythbusters television show. So there's plenty of audio of Frank Doyle, and he has a very unmistakable, raspy voice. And so Frank Doyle did say to one of his students, this is it, this is the final exam. Yes.
And by labeling you eco-terrorist, the FBI took jurisdiction of the case rather than the ATF, who would normally manage cases with explosives, right?
That's right. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms was there. FBI was there. Oakland Police was there. Actually, the FBI handed the case off to the Oakland Police, which was their way of not holding the bag. They let the Oakland Police Department hold the bag. But you also have to remember that the FBI and the Oakland Police have a long-standing symbiotic relationship. They went after the Black Panthers in the 1960s. And what's important to remember about 1990 is a lot of those disinformation agents of the FBI and a lot of those Oakland Police officers and personnel were also there 22 years earlier in 1968. So that the point is that the FBI and local police still had a long-standing relationship of cooperation in tarnishing the reputation of activists.
Right. And the explosion itself left a hole under the floorboard of the driver's side of the car, right?
That is correct. Directly underneath Judi Bari's right under her butt, right? The bomb went off and fractured her pelvis, created intestinal damage. It was underneath her seat. The FBI lied and said the bomb was behind the seat. Now, keeping in mind, the Oakland police agreed with this, although they actually didn't at first. If you look at the Oakland police records, before the FBI got there, the Oakland police was saying that the bomb was clearly under the seat, where we would not have seen it. But the FBI made their lie that the bomb was either behind the seat or even on top of the back seat or even inside a guitar case. I mean, they kept changing their story, but the point is that they were trying to make it so we would have seen the bomb. Now, ironically, even if the bomb had been behind the seat or on the seat, we wouldn't have necessarily seen it. Judi had 2 children, and kids leave a car a mess. So it's not like even if something's on the backseat floorboard, you would have seen it. But the point is it wasn't. It was underneath the seat where it was hidden.
And the very same day you were arrested for transporting explosives on the day that you were attacked.
Yes.
And beginning on that day of the bombing, and then for the next 7 weeks, the FBI and Oakland Police Department publicly told the media that you and Judi were the only suspects.
Well, not only did they, for the next 7 weeks, they pretty much said so right through the lawsuit that we filed in 2002. They never relinquished, they never declared us innocent. They always considered us suspects right through trial. So that is correct.
And 5 days after the bombing, the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat newspaper received a letter signed by the Lords Avenger claiming responsibility for the bombing that included details about the construction of the bombs that was not public knowledge. Is that right?
That is correct. And the Lords Avenger described quite enough, dozens and dozens of component parts of the bomb, like the brand of the pocket watch, the solder that was used, the brand of the battery, the color of the wires, things that only the bomber would know. But the Lords Avenger also described 2 bombs, not one, the bomb underneath Judi Bari's driver's seat and also the bomb that exploded unsuccessfully. It was kind of a dud, but it did partially explode at the Cloverdale Mill 2 weeks earlier. So the Lords Avenger took credit for 2 bombings, not one.
And even though Judi was still in the hospital when that letter was received, the FBI issued a new search warrant for Judi's house a month later to retrieve her typewriter. Is that right?
That is correct. No matter what evidence came out to prove us innocent, the FBI would somehow or other twist it in a really perverted way to make that evidence, to say that evidence was made us guilty. So if a letter came out taking credit for the bombing, well then, since we were guilty, we obviously wrote the letter ourselves, or one of our friends must have.
And 7 weeks after the bombing, the Oakland District Attorney's office did not press any charges against you because there was no evidence to convict you of anything.
That is correct. The district attorney, Chris Carpenter, refused to press evidence. Apparently, he didn't get the memo. He wasn't in the loop. But the point is the damage had been done. The bomber had escaped. The finger pointing was toward us. Our reputations had been tarnished. And Redwood Summer continued on right through September, but with this giant cloud hanging over its head of, our Judi and Daryl and the rest of Earth First terrorists. That was a big theme.
And 12 years later, 2002, 6 law enforcement officers were found guilty of breaking the law and violating your civil rights to frame you and Judi.
That's right. We originally sued probably closer to 25 FBI agents and police officers, but the judge whittled it down to 7, 6 of which were found liable. In a civil suit, it's not guilty or not guilty. It's liable or not liable. But yes, they were found guilty and ordered to pay us $4.4 million collectively by a jury, a unanimous jury, and it was not a liberal Bay Area jury. There was a lot of conservatives on that jury.
And even 8 years after that ruling and 20 years after the actual bombing, the FBI wanted to destroy evidence from the pipe bomb incident in Cloverdale, which potentially could contain clues to actually the real bomber.
Yes, because one thing that I always have said as a mantra is if you want to solve the bombing of Judi Bari's car and of Judi Bari, all you got to do is look at the Cloverdale bomb, because the same bomb maker made both bombs. So the Cloverdale bomb barely went off. You had an entirely intact bomb, the pipe, there was a gasoline can that was intact, everything, the wires, the watch, the works. And so you could look for fingerprints, DNA, other telltale signs relating to evidence. In fact, I've read more about bombings than I ever thought I would, but that if you have an unexploded bomb, they call that the holy grail of bomb investigations.
And this will be my last little timeline comment. 30 years later, the FBI and Oakland Police Department still have refused to investigate any other suspects.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, when they tried to destroy the evidence, as part of a post-trial, post-victory, post-jury verdict settlement agreement to get money from them, we took a little bit less money than the $4.4 million. We took $4 million. We waived attorney's fees, but also I had 2 non-monetary demands. One of them was for the city of Oakland to make May 24th Judi Bari Day, which they did. And the second, May 24th being the day that we were bombed. And the second demand I had was for the FBI and Oakland Police, once they were done with their investigation, to return the evidence to us, which the FBI started to renege on that promise, saying they couldn't turn over an exploded bomb to us because that's a bomb, and it's not a bomb; it's a bunch of pieces of scrap metal. It wasn't a bomb; it was an exploded pieces of whatever, but they were pretending that it was an actual bomb and couldn't turn it over to us. But the judge ordered that happen, and we did run tests on it. But may I also say we ran tests prior to our lawsuit. In 2000, we ran DNA tests, as we did again in 2014-ish, I do believe. And there is evidence. There's DNA on the Lord Avenger letter. But by the way, the DNA on the letter that took credit for bombing us is that of an unknown female. And then there's DNA on a death threat and a police informant letter, and that is a DNA of potentially somebody that we know and recognized and pointed to, or at least one of his relatives. So yes, we have evidence, clear evidence that points to, individuals. But when asked if they would, run the DNA against the national database, especially the unknown female, and was it a female who bombed us? Hard to say. It's also possible that the Lord's Avenger, when I found out it was a female DNA on the letter that took credit for us, I asked, well, does the Lord's Avenger have a secretary? Or a wife, or is the bomber female? It's hard to say. But the point is that the FBI refused to look at that. They have no. And then when I brought this evidence to local police departments, I approached the Oakland District Attorney. I met with the Sonoma County District Attorney because the Cloverdale Mill was in Sonoma. I met with the Humboldt County District Attorney, and I met with the Mendocino County Sheriffs with the evidence in hand, and they all basically say the same thing. If the FBI refuses to cooperate, they can't really conduct an investigation because they need to work with the FBI in other cases. And what if the FBI has something to do with it? Do you think these smaller police departments are going to go after them? Well, they told me themselves they are not.
Are you at peace with the person that bombed you never being held accountable?
I am not at peace with that, but so no, I am not. And one of the manifestations of that was that I have continued to search for the bomber. It goes in spurts. I might take 2 years on and 2 years off. I'm sort of in a down period right now. We have a $50,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the bomber, and that reward is still good. And and I put out a movie, Who Bombed Judi Bari, that asks the question. So, no, I'm not at peace with it. To know that there's somebody who tried to kill you, or at least tried to kill Judi, since I was in the car, inadvertently, although fortuitously, as it turned out, because I lived to carry on the lawsuit and also lived to keep, Judi alive and talking until the medics showed up. No, it's very disconcerting to think that somebody out there who tried to kill us is still out there. But there is a certain acceptance. I mean, I know what killed Judi Bari. What killed Judi Bari was her opposition to the timber industry and her building bridges with the loggers and the mill workers, the timber workers. And I have an idea. I've done research, hard research, and that the FBI might have used a informant who was also a bomb maker in the Bay Area. And I have a name. I'm not going to give you that name right now, but I have a name of a bomber from San Francisco who was convicted and went to prison for other crimes, who was working with the FBI right around the time of the bombing in San Francisco. And so the FBI has a long track record going back to the civil rights movement, and even with the mafia in solving organized crime activities, of working with informants, and they allow those informants to literally conduct murder. I mean, the Whitey Bulger case is a very well-known case where the FBI allowed a hitman for the Boston mob, Whitey Bulger, to go on continuing to kill people as long as he gave the FBI information. And Whitey Bulger was eventually convicted and put in prison, where he was murdered because he was an informant, probably in his 80s, may I say. But this goes back to the Ku Klux Klan, where the FBI allowed the Klan to kill people even though they had informants inside the Klan. So the FBI using informants to do their dirty work is a well-known method of operation for the FBI.
And I only have two more questions related to this. If you and Judi had died on that day, do you have any doubt that you would have gone down in history as incompetent would-be terrorists?
I don't really do what-ifs very well.
Okay.
So I can't. I know that our friends, our comrades on the timber wars would have defended us, but I can't really tell you that because who knows what would have happened? What would have happened if I had not gotten into the car? Judi might have died, and there I would be, the boyfriend breaking up with her. And we all know that the majority of murders are committed by people and are often domestic abuse related. So they would say, "Oh yeah, Daryl tried to kill Judi because they broke up. She broke up with him." So, but I got into the car, which if that was the plan, it ruined the plan and then forced the FBI to do something that they're actually terrible at, and they are documented as being terrible at this. They are terrible at improvising. I've read a number of books, quite a few books in the FBI, and when they make an arrest, when they make a bust, it's always very pre-planned. It's not like the local police department when they see a crime, they have to go out and run and chase the burglar down the street, or go stop a bank robbery in progress, or like they have to think with their feet. The FBI does wiretaps, they do calculated decisions, and then they go in, and any time, like Waco, for example, or there's been quite a number of cases where the FBI messed up because they had to improvise rather than have a battle plan. And so when I got into the car, if there was a plan, I ruined that plan by both getting in the car and then living along with Judi.
And what does this 30-year anniversary date mean to you?
Means I'm getting old. It seems like yesterday. one thing that we have arranged that has been disrupted by the COVID-19 coronavirus phenomenon is we do have a exhibit for the Mendocino County Museum that has been postponed. But when Judi passed away, she actually was in possession of the bomb car, and she left that bomb car to the Mendocino County Museum in the town of Willits, California. And so I've been agitating for years, actually, 5 or 6 or 7 years, for them to put that car on exhibit. Well, finally, on the 30th anniversary, the museum agreed to do that, starting in early May. Actually, the exhibit was supposed to open tomorrow, May 2nd, being that we're talking on May 1st at the moment. And the museum has been closed and the exhibit's been postponed. But so what that meant was that the 30th anniversary meant we were going to have commemorative events, celebrations of Judi and her work, including a museum exhibit that we were planning to take on the road. I had actually already contacted the Oakland Museum to see if we couldn't take the bomb car on the road, at least as far as Oakland, where, of course, the dirty deed occurred. It makes me wonder, I sometimes go, well, what can I do right now to solve this case more than what I've done? And I know there's always something else you can do. But right now, my focus has been on honoring Judi on the 30th anniversary.
So I'd like to shift and talk about some more of the positive outcomes of your efforts with Judi and also Greg. Was preserving the headwaters forests your biggest accomplishment in your view?
Yeah, and by the way, it's Greg King, who lives up in Arcata, California, and he's a fourth-generation Humboldt County resident. It's been said that the King Range up on the coast has been named after his family. Just want to give Greg some kudos, and he was a man who named Headwaters Forest. And there was quite a number of other young people who were involved in saving headwaters. But to answer your question, yes. If saving headwaters, which we did do, we say part of headwaters, I should say, was an accomplishment, I would have preferred that saving a forest be our most well-known accomplishment, to have, but instead, we're sort of known as the people who beat the FBI. But yes, I consider that to be, the truth is, Andrew, that my personal greatest accomplishment is is in my later years. I'm 64 now, but at the age of 56, I had a child for the first time, a daughter, and who I love amazingly. And so raising my daughter is my greatest accomplishment by far. But that said, in terms of the realm of politics, yes, saving Headwaters Forest in ancient Redwood Grove between Fortuna and Eureka is, I consider, my greatest effort, along with the many, many people, Greg King and Kurt Newman and Larry Evans and Todd Swarthout and Judi Bari, of course, and so many others, Betty Ball and Gary Ball, Pam Davis. The list is pretty long of the people who went to protect headwaters. Yes, that's a wonderful accomplishment to have some ancient redwoods, because the reason I even moved to Humboldt County was to live among the redwoods. And when I heard they were being cut down, that was back in 1985 when I first moved here, I was shocked, and I knew that if I traveled from New York City, where I grew up, to Humboldt I was heading to California, heading to San Francisco, but got waylaid in Humboldt and never left to this day. That if that was my love, the redwoods were my love, that having a redwood park, a national reserve, actually, the Headwaters Forest National Reserve, as a part of our legacy, yes, that is one of the greatest things that, if not the greatest thing that I've helped accomplish.
And didn't you help preserve some other groves like Trout Creek and Raven's Call? I'm not as familiar with those areas. Yes.
There's been many little victories along the way, and one thing I like to share with activists or anybody, trying to accomplish anything, because, activism, if I may digress for a moment, is really just making a difference in the world. Whether you're coaching a soccer team or you're trying to save a forest, you're contributing, you're volunteering, you're contributing to society in your own way. So in 1988, we blockaded a portion of 18,000 acres that was slated to be logged by the federal government on Bureau of Land Management and Land. That was the Caddo Wilderness. And so, yes, and then, believe it or not, it was actually George W. Bush in, I believe, 2007 who signed protection of the Caddo Wilderness into law 19 years later. One of the things I may say about, just to interject again about activism, is that patience is a virtue. 12 years to sue the FBI, 2 more years to get the money, 19 years between the time we blockaded Caddo and to the time it got 18,000 acres got preserved into law. It's okay to not have instant gratification. Trout Creek was a small Boy Scout camp that we protected, really just through a rent, not rent, but we encourage people to withhold their bills, paying their bills from PG&E, because PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, was the owner of this Boy Scout camp, and PG&E was going to log a Boy Scout camp that they happened to own. We stopped that. Raven's Call in Enchanted Meadow. I sat in a tree there for only, I think, 3 days, and then somebody took my place. I was going to stay longer, but I was up there as Robin Hood. I had the Merry Men with me, Robin Hood, Little John, and Friar Tuck, and we actually spoke with sort of fake medieval accents and never went out of character. But I came down after 3 days. Somebody went up at my place. But that area got saved, yes. Then there are probably some other places we wound up protecting, and also perhaps even greater than the areas we protected is the way of thinking that the wilderness has a right to exist for its own sake, regardless of its benefit to humans, as biocentrism, as the Earth First philosophy, that Earth comes first, that our the strategy and philosophy of environmental protection has been advanced in terms of how we see the world, being that the world has a right to exist for far beyond its benefit to humans, and that's part of what we contributed to as well.
Great, thank you. I actually have a couple questions related to activism in general.
I'm sorry. I want to interject something else.
Sure.
Notice that books have been written, not both about us and also by us. Judi Bari wrote Timber Wars. Julia Butterfly, who sat in a tree for 2 years, wrote The Legacy of Luna. I was one of her key publicists, support people, strategists for her, along with other people. Don't want to take all the credit by any means, but there's a book there. There's about 36 books I have on my shelf that reference our battle. In fact, the new book that came out, oh, goodness gracious, it's in my backpack. It's a very well-known book. Is really about us. It's told from the standpoint of a tree, but it's a very popular book at the moment, and I'm going to tell you the name of it. And I say this because you asked what our accomplishments were, and so when I mentioned the way of thinking and strategies, these are, having books tell our story is one way to stay around for a while. And the name of the current book, which is a fictionalization, is called The Overstory. By Richard Powers, and apparently my character is a fellow named Moses. There's even a science fiction book which depicts Judi and I called A Friend of the Earth by T.C. Boyle, which takes place in the future. They actually have a Judi and Daryl character in a science fiction book in the future where the world is coming to an end. And the reason I know that these are fictionalizations is both of those books reference my songs. A Friend of the Earth references Where Are We Going to Work When the Trees Are Gone? And Overstory references You Can't Clear Cut Your Way to Heaven. Both are my tunes, and the point is simply that we have a legacy that goes far beyond just our actual activities, but go into the future in terms of the message that we put out.
Thank you. I actually also just interviewed David Harris, who wrote The Last Stand, and you're a key character in that book as well.
Yes. Yes, there's quite a number of books, actually. I actually counted over 3 dozen.
Okay, so back to my activism question. In your experience, because you've done so many different, I'll say, tactics, were the legal options, monkey-wrenching activities, unionizing timber workers, or organized mass protest the most effective way to make positive change?
That is a great question. One I wasn't expecting. So, I got to think for a second. Well, my gut answer is that they all worked in conjunction with each other, and more than just those. I mean, even the Earth First itself, especially in its early days, pointed out that it takes all the tools in the toolbox, to have at your disposal to wage an effective campaign. There's probably well over a dozen or 15 groups, from Greenpeace to the Rose Foundation in the Bay Area to Rainforest Action Network to Earth First to EPIC, Environmental Protection Information Center in Garberville, to the Sierra Club, to the Audubon Society. I could give you this laundry list of groups, each one which had a different approach. Unions as well, the United Steelworkers of America, all of which had, and the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies, all of which had something to do with saving headwaters forest and engaging in environmental protection. I mean, building bridges with the timber workers, which went beyond the timber workers, because after Judi died, I went up and marched the picket line with the United Steelworkers of America, who were on strike against Kaiser Aluminum, which was owned by the same company that owned Pacific Lumber Company, which was Maxam. So Maxam was messing with the workers at the aluminum mills in 3 different states, including Washington State, as well as Ohio and Louisiana. And Maxam was also messing with the Redwoods, not to mention the workers there. So that was very powerful, because it really, building bridges with people who are supposed to be your opponents, that is key, because the main tactic used against us is divide and conquer, as we see today with the current presidential administration. Divide people and conquer them. And so if you can transcend the divide and conquer, you've really gone a long way, which I believe is probably the main reason that Judi Bari was targeted for assassination. But it doesn't stand alone. You still have to have your cause. What are you trying to do? And often Judi would say, and I would agree because I was there, that the best way to meet loggers was to blockade them. And then next thing you know, you're standing on a picket line or a blockade line, and the loggers are cursing at you or talking to you, waiting the police are showing up. And after you finish talking to the loggers, you ask them out for a cup of coffee. After you either hauled away and arrested or you give up the line for whatever reason, you ask them out for a cup of coffee, and sometimes they say yes. And then next thing you know, you're building a bridge. Lawsuits, very powerful. But the lawsuits often don't come until the organization filing the lawsuit sees that there's public sentiment. Public sentiment can mean raising funds, very much so. Lawsuits are expensive. Or it could just mean that there's a will of the people to want to save a particular grove. So really, all of these things you mentioned and more work in conjunction with each other. They don't stand alone.
What advice would you give to an individual that wants to protect their backyard from being destroyed?
Well, I do have, I really do need to turn this into either a pamphlet or even a short book, but something I call Daryl's 20 Rules of Activism. And you can look that up on the internet. It's both on my website, darylcherney.com, DARRYL, Cherney, CHERNEY.com. It's a music but also written word website. Daryl's 20 Rules of Activism are probably my legacy of advice to activists. They include things such as never turn down help. You'd be amazed how many people turn down help, even in day-to-day life. Hey, let me help you fix your car. No, I'm okay. Or let me help you carry your suitcase. No, I'm all right. And my number 2 rule is never turn down money. I am astounded at how many people turn down money. I have stories of, no, I don't need the money. We were trying to fix, give somebody money to fix their tire who was a big activist. No, I'll fix it. I'll raise the money. People turn down money, so never turn down help, never turn down money. Write it down. You got a list of things to do in the activist world. Write it down on a piece of paper. Make a list, a to-do list. Really key. It seems simple. Rule number 4 is don't believe your own BS. I actually say the word in full in my 20 rules. But sometimes people tend to believe propaganda, even the propaganda they're putting out, which isn't necessarily true. I'll give you an example of the other side. If the one FBI agent tells another FBI agent, oh, Daryl and Judi are guilty, and another FBI agent, they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else, and they're believing their own BS to the point where nobody even knows where the BS started with. So don't believe your own BS. Another rule is don't allow lawyers to determine your strategy. Lawyers and activists have opposite roles. Activists' job is to get in trouble, and lawyers' jobs are to get you out of trouble. So never allow a lawyer to determine your strategy. I'll skip a bunch. Consensus. You can violate consensus, but only if you're right. That's a good one. So you can have a vote or a consensus, and everybody decides, yeah, we're going to do this. And then somebody goes ahead and does something different that you didn't agree to. Well, we sometimes call that an individual act of bravado. Well, you can do an individual, but only if you're right. If you're wrong, you're going to get kicked out of your group, but if you're right, you're the hero. Toward the end, music is the sugar coating of the truth pill, that if you can sing something rather than tell somebody something, they're going to hear it a lot better. And the last rule number 20, is surf the tidal wave, meaning that if you get sucked in by all the details of your issue, you can just get so angry and so obsessed and so spun out of control about the different things you have to do that you lose sight of the bigger picture. So surfing the tidal wave means staying on top of the issue rather than getting sucked in by the details. So the details could be something like, well, Judi and Daryl got bombed. I'm going to become an activist, to help them prove their innocence, as opposed to the main mission, which is protecting the forest and helping people understand our connection with the earth. One of the reasons I haven't become an animal rights activist is if I watch videos, and I've seen some, of, gorillas or monkeys or bunny rabbits getting tortured to make cosmetics or for medical research or whatever the case is, I would be so upset and so angry I could think of nothing else. And I do, believe me, think of such things. But some people become so obsessed. I know dog people who rescue dogs or cats. Next thing you know, they got 10 dogs or 50 cats in their house, and their life has gone, kind of like down the drain a little bit. And so it's important to see that the most important thing you can do is the bigger picture of let's stop these horrors from happening rather than getting sucked in by the horrors themselves. That's called surfing the tidal wave.
Do you mind sharing the stories of both protest incidents you were involved with at the Golden Gate Bridge and just your memories of those?
Yes. The first one I was much more involved in than the second one. But they were both Marin County stories because the Golden Gate Bridge connects San Francisco to Marin County. And the first one was 1990, Earth Day. Actually, it was right after Earth Day. I think it was the Monday after Earth Day, April 24th, 1990. And the same day as Bomb School, by the way, just as an FYI. It was Greg King, again, one of the founders of Headwaters Forest, and our compatriots decided to climb the Golden Gate Bridge and hang a huge banner from 400 feet up. Now, you got to keep in mind, a lot of Earth Firsters, and this is no accident, are also climbers, rock climbers, not scared of heights. And so I was involved in this particular action. Very much so, but not in the climbing part. I was doing publicity, also strategy, also reconnaissance, even things like driving the Golden Gate Bridge at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, or actually maybe just standing on the bridge with a stopwatch, and timing. When are the least amount of cars driving by? Which, by the way, the answer to that question is 4:15 in the morning. FYI. Seeing what kind of locks are on the elevator, what kind of locks are on the spans. If you want to climb the bridge, you have to go up the span. All these things had to be done. Then, at the day came, I was at a telephone making press calls, but my much more brave friends cut the locks to the spans, put new locks on so people can get through, and on both sides. Oh, and then the reason the traffic was so important, there was a 15-second gap between cars at 4:15 in the morning. They ran across the bridge and connected two ropes together, so that both spans, we're talking, quite a few, I don't know, it was 100 feet of rope, but quite a bit of rope, and you had to run across the highway in the middle of the night when no cars are coming. And then they climbed the bridge with this rope between them. So both teams climbed up both spans, got to the top, and the plan was to unveil a banner that said, and it was oh my goodness, how long was that banner? 100 feet, and it was on netting, hand-stitched letters on netting, because you had to have it on netting so the wind wouldn't blow it. And the letters were in 7 or 8 feet tall letters. But I was at these stitching parties. I mean, there was, 30 people at a sewing party stitching these letters on, and it said, "Save this planet." This is Earth Day, 20th anniversary, the day after. Save this planet. 1, defend ancient forests. 2, fossil fuels, /. And 3, Earth first. And that banner was going to be dropped down for rush hour traffic. But unfortunately, they were spotted. And the iron workers, good union men that they are, cut the locks, came dashing up the bridge. And by the way, that's their territory, that's their turf. So they kind of had a pretty aggro attitude about Earth Firsters being on their bridge. And literally almost threw people off the bridge to their deaths. The activists, who were really good climbers and really strong guys, were so concerned, frightened for their lives, they had to forsake putting the banner across, getting the banner down. And so the banner never got hung. There was lots of great pictures from, the Chronicle and other pictures, but no, the banner didn't get dropped down. That was number 1, 1990. Then 1997, I believe, Woody Harrelson wanted to do the same thing. And I was there at the original planning meeting, but I did not have anything to do with the actual planning of putting that banner across the bridge. That banner did go across the bridge. I, to be honest, was not a fan of that banner. It was too vague. The banner said, Charles Hurwitz, aren't redwoods more precious than gold? Which was a reference to the fact that the owner of Maxam, when he took over Pacific Lumber and its vast trove of ancient redwoods, told the employees that the golden rule is those that have the gold rule. And so this was it didn't mention Maxam, it didn't mention Headwaters, it didn't mention Humboldt County, it didn't mention the redwoods we were trying to save. It simply said, Charles Hurwitz, aren't redwoods more precious than gold? And that banner did get hung with Woody Harrelson and a lot of Greenpeace activists as well as some Earth First activists. And that one got hung in 1997. There were good photographs of that. But really, it's a shame that our first banner hang across the bridge didn't, really kill it, because that would have been the cat's meow in terms of messages. But that said, those are the 2 bridge stories right there.
What do you believe is the biggest threat to the remaining redwoods today?
Well, first of all, even when we started back in 1986, 34 years ago, there was only 3% of the ancient redwoods left. That number's probably down to 2% or 1%. So, you have a gene pool problem, you have a soil erosion problem, habitat problem, a development problem, the land being taken over for other uses. Regrowing on depleted soil is an issue. Cutting down young trees again a second or a third time really even further depletes the soil and the habitat. And then really I think the greatest threat of all, which is not just to the redwoods, but which is toward the entire environment, is that people fail to see in large numbers, in billions is what I'm talking about globally, how connected we are to the environment, the air, the water, the earth, that our food. We see increase in birth defects. We see people being poisoned from their drinking water from Flint, Michigan, and beyond. We see, nuclear radiation fallout from Chernobyl and elsewhere, creating horrifying birth defects in the children and then the children's children of people who suffered that fallout. We see animals going extinct every single day, whether it's, we are on the verge of losing our polar bears, our tigers, our elephants, not to mention, the animals here in the United States. So those are the problem is really the way we think of ourselves in relation to the planet. And until we shift and see that our actions directly affect our ability to survive on the planet, we are not going to solve this problem. And so, right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have an excellent opportunity to reflect, to look at our own relationship to ourselves inside of our own homes, our relationship to each other, to understand that the way we treat each other and approach each other literally has everything to do with our own survival. And so that is really the key, to see that we are not independent, but rather we are interdependent with each other and planet Earth.
Borrowed Time is a collaborative effort by librarians to combat climate change by discussing sustainability issues and all things related to the human influence on our ecosystem. For more episodes, visit borrowed-time.org.